Suspend your disbelief, your rational, analytic mind, just for a minute, just for the length of this podcast. What if all I am about to tell you is the truth? What if the information you will be provided is from a divine source? Just for this time, I am your Axis Mundi. Consider this podcast your channel, your second opinion. When I do a reading, something larger than myself is working through me. So ask what you wish. This is your channel, your doorway to the divine. Well, welcome to John's Tarot. Welcome to another week of John's Tarot. I'm glad you could join me. I was away last week working in the hospital, and wowzer. Winter time is always a busy time on the ICU. I would like to say that if you'd like to be a guest here on John's Tarot, please contact me at john@johnstarot.net. I have a little webpage. You can contact me through there, and we will set up an interview for you. I'm always looking for guests. I'll guest on UFOs, paranormal, AI, science, divination, anything that's kind of interesting. I would definitely like to interview you. If you have a book or a charity you want to promote, all those things are very important, and I would like to go ahead and interview you. So go ahead and contact me. I also want to say that for the month of January, I will continue to offer free tarot readings, especially for people in the drug and alcohol recovery community. And it's such a difficult thing. I've been messing around on Reddit, talking to some people, and there's always newcomers way out in left field on Reddit. They all want something for nothing. What I mean by that is recovery is one of these deals where you've got to put some energy in. Oh, I don't like those meetings. I don't like this. I don't like that. It's not required that you like it. It's only required that if you want to get better, that's suggested that you do it. I talked to one guy. He does a coaching, which was quite interesting, and he's helping those who don't want to help themselves. They want to do it their own way, and I don't know how he's going to do that. I only know one way of recovery, and I use a 12-step model. And I've been coming on him pretty hard because of what I've been seeing at the hospital. We had some fentanyl deaths this year, this last week. And, these were just people messing around, doing a little recreational drug use. These were hardcore addicts. And they died. They died. I couldn't, I want to say I couldn't believe it, but I believe it. When I was young, we used to mess around with drugs and stuff, and it was, there was a potential for bad things to happen. But now with the fentanyl on the streets like that, you just don't know what you're going to get. One experimentation could be your last experimentation. So that's why I'm offering free readings to newcomers in the recovery community. I support recovery. The universe supports recovery. You don't know how you're going to do it, but it can be done. Like I said, I use a 12-step model. The universe definitely supports recovery from these types of substances so you can lead a long, healthy, and fulfilling life. I've lived a very full life, education, career, home, marriage, all those things, But if I would have continued on the way I was going, I would have had none of those things. So if you need a little help along the way, please contact me, and I will be glad to help you. Today's guest is Amethyst Mahoney, and I will go ahead and do the intro with the interview. She was a very interesting guest. We talked for about a half an hour after the interview. I thought she was so interesting, and I think you're going to find today's interview very interesting. Her focus currently is on using tarot in therapy. She talks about that, and also she talks about recovery from religious trauma. I had never thought about religious trauma. And with the people that what's going on in our government and our current society today, I think we're going to see a lot more of that type of thing. I think Amethyst is going to see a lot more clients because there's going to be a lot of people having trouble over the next 4 years. It's going to be weird. So let's just see what happens. Let me switch over to the interview with Amethyst. I hope you enjoy the interview. It's really interesting. Oh, and then afterwards, if you want it like a free reading, I'll be available for free readings. Well, welcome to John's Tarot. And today on John's Tarot, I'd like to welcome Amethyst Mahoney. Amethyst is a psychoanalyst turned tarot reader, which I thought was very interesting. And she found working with cards better than talk therapy. Amethyst is a speaker and an author. She has written such books as the 2025 Tarot Business Planner, Tarot Symbols and Meanings, Tarot Empowered Business Systems, Religious Trauma, the Mega Bundle, 50 Places Your Clients Are Hiding in Plain Sight. And I have a feeling she has a lot more things. And Amethyst has come to us today to talk to us about the sneaky ways in which religious trauma shows up in our lives. Hi, Amethyst.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm glad you could make some time to talk with us today. Could you give me a little bio? How did you? I'm always interested in people's stories. You know, what brings us together at this point in time? Could you give me a little bio, please?
Yeah, so when I was really young, besides, being an entrepreneur, I always wanted to help people and I wanted to find a way to do that. So by the time I was about 12 years old, I decided to be a psychologist. And so I went on that path and I did that for 13 years. And what I noticed was that people would get a little bit better and then they would have a step back. And everybody around me was who was a therapist, who had been in therapy for decades and leaders in the field. We would all go to conferences. I've presented at conferences and things like this. And we always had the same complaints. And we would be like, well, maybe this next new therapy coming up will be the thing that'll make it stick. Maybe this next conference will be the thing. And at some point, I decided to start integrating tarot cards with my clients, and it worked really well, really, really well, better than just talk therapy. And so I started teaching my colleagues how to do this, and then eventually someone found out I was using tarot cards, and some people flipped out. There was a statewide
Oh,
meeting.
yeah.
The state board got involved because people thought tarot was evil. I'm like, I'm in Seattle. How are you? How is this a thing? I'm from the South originally. What are you people doing in Seattle? But it's everywhere. And even though the clients were getting really good results, people said, well, you can't use tarot cards. And I said, fine, I quit. I'm going to go open my own practice. I'm going to use tarot. I'm going to develop tarot therapy, which I have a course on that. I'm revamping right now, and I'll be bringing out tarot therapy books here in a year or two, which I'm really excited about because I get a lot of pushback from everyone, but especially the tarot community who says tarot isn't therapy. Don't pretend it is. Leave therapy out of it. No, no. So what we know now, there's been a lot of trauma research over the years, and what we know is that talk therapy does not work for trauma. And since almost everybody has trauma, obviously, talk therapy isn't going to work for them. And so I've actually spoken at the Global Center for Religious Research, the GCRR, on their psychology conference about using tarot as therapy and using it to overcome religious trauma. So I'm legit. It's a legit thing. I was really excited to be able to get a bunch of psychologists on board with this whole concept as well.
How define to me what is religious trauma? How does that? What does that look like?
So, religious trauma can look like a lot of different things, but basically, it's when you are told something in your religion that is an absolute, and you are threatened with, if you don't believe this way, act these certain ways, or do these certain things, you are in fear of not only possibly your soul because you might go to hell for all eternity, but also losing your entire community that is built around that particular religion, and losing your friends and family who are all involved in that religion as well. And so sometimes people think religious trauma is only sexual abuse, but it's not. It's actually the very foundation of any fundamentalist religion that tells you that this is the only way and this is the only thing that you can believe. And if you don't believe this, you're ostracized.
I was involved with a Buddhist organization many years ago, and actually they were very helpful to me. But I found out that I really didn't fit into organized religion because of those issues. So we don't
Mhm.
believe like that. We like this, and we only and
Mm.
if you don't believe and do like we do, you're not fitting in. And at some point I said, you know what, I'm an adult. I could decide what I think is right, and I was able to pull away from it. Although for a period of my life it was very helpful.
Yeah.
The people people the the people find problems with their relationships as a result of religious trauma, work problems as a result of this.
Everything. So when, especially if you're grown up in a fundamentalist religion, and
Uh,
fundamentalism is just that belief that things have to be done a certain way, and that's the only way. So for in my case, it applied to fundamentalist Christianity. I was raised as a Southern Baptist, and no matter where I went, it was a controlling thing. I was only supposed to, as a child, I had to, be seen but not heard. I'm a woman, sit down and shut up. All these different roles of what I could and could not do in different communities and different churches. It was some people couldn't dance or you'd go to hell, even, which is ridiculous, right? But when you grow up in that, especially, or if you convert into a fundamentalist religion, what happens is it actually causes changes to your brain. So your amygdala can shrink. So if you're exposed to these beliefs and indoctrinated as a young child, your brain does not form the way it's supposed to. Your prefrontal cortex does not connect across both the right and left hemispheres of your brain correctly. You have less neuron connections, and it just causes all kinds of issues. So these days, people talk a lot about cognitive dissonance and these all of these beliefs and how they cause CPTSD, and people are really pushing to get CPTSD as a diagnosis in the next DSM, which we're on 5 right now, so maybe DSM-5 TR, the way the Psychology Association goes. The DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that people use to diagnose you with some kind of issue so that basically your insurance will pay for therapy. You have to have a diagnosis. And a lot of people are really big on having a diagnosis, but they want CPTSD in there, and that is complex post traumatic stress disorder. And what that means is a lot of people, sorry, I'm trying to break down all the acronyms, but it takes a while. Post traumatic stress disorder, most people are familiar with if you have a car accident or if someone goes to war, that is kind of a specific incident in war, right? It's kind of a one thing happens. So, car accident would be the best example. One thing happens, and now you have all of this post traumatic stress around it. With religious trauma, you have these things happen every single day of your life because most people are told every single day you have to pray, or, God may not love you. You have to make sure that you do everything right, or that demon on your shoulder will take control of your body, or if you tell a lie. I know kids as young as 4 and 5 years old, if you tell a lie you could go to hell for all eternity. That is, to me, child abuse. That is a horrible way to bring up your children. So all of these things that you're taught over the years, they cause issues in every facet of your life. So in my life map system, I actually have a graph that breaks it into 8 areas of your life. And so we have the your physical environment, even where you live, even where you're allowed to travel in your life, or if you are allowed to move from one place to another, can be rooted in religious trauma, because people tell you you should grow where God planted you. And a lot of fundamentalists do not move more than 50 miles outside of their little area where they grew up. And that's, even though that's changed a lot over the past 3 decades, it's still true, especially in these really tight knit communities. If someone wants to go explore the world, that's the devil tempting you, right? You're not supposed to think outside of the box you've been put in. And that is why so many people will say that education makes you a libtard, right? You shouldn't go get a college education unless it's in Bible school, because you're going to be tempted by the devil. And there's a lot of people these days saying, well, if education and learning things is what makes you pull away from the religion, maybe the religion is actually the problem. Christianity in particular has a long history, even from like 200 BCE, where the Gnostic kind of sects were getting together, and before the whole thing really started, but of saying things like education is will lead you astray. You don't need education, you need faith. And so these days, when there's rallies around political leaders and people like that who are like, oh, I love the uneducated people, of course you do, of course you do, and that's indoctrination, and that is not something that we should be proud of. So even starting from there, and what you're allowed to learn, where you're allowed to grow, and what other things you're allowed to experience in the world. You've probably seen those posts on the internet of, you can't do yoga, you can't meditate, you can't do this and this, right? If you read the Bible, which if you're a fundamentalist, most likely you have not, then you know that Jesus, I'm being serious. Like most people I know who are deconstructing or who have left a fundamentalist religion, and it's not just Christianity. I have clients who have been Hindu. I have clients who have been Muslim as well. And like you said, even Buddhism has some things in it that are very strict. And but anybody who has read the Bible knows that it said Jesus went to the desert to meditate. So you're sitting here saying you can't meditate. What is going on? you know
No, I meditate a little bit almost every day. I almost every day. But probably
Mhm.
it's been very helpful. I found
Yeah.
that how does tarot work? I mean, I found it useful in my life. I'm a self-taught tarot reader. I won't go into the
Mm.
story, but it has really brought stuff out in me, and I use it primarily as a way of introspection. And
Yes.
what's going on with me? What do I need to look at? What's the significance of what's going on with me? I think we talked a little bit about individuation, and it kind of that's what the outcome of the fool's journey is. And I didn't know anything
Exactly.
about I didn't know anything about that until it happened to me. And then I started reading about it. I said, "Oh
Yeah.
my, oh my goodness!" And I'll talk about that at another time. How are you using tarot in your practice?
Well, before we get into that, let me just say one thing. I want to step back is that if you have religious trauma, let me tell you some of the ways it may show up otherwise in your life. If you have perfectionist tendencies, if you think that you're supposed to be perfect at everything, if you are a procrastinator, if you have ADHD, OCD, anxiety, depression, religious trauma can actually cause all of those things. So I see a lot of people around the internet who have, whole not just threads, but their whole purpose on the internet is, right? All of their posts and everything are about one of those particular things. And you'll see people say things, even women who are like, we need to tear down the patriarchy. Well, that's from religious trauma as well. That's religion has set up the patriarchy. So we need to figure out a way for everyone to come together and not be anti one gender or the other 16 genders that are now a thing. I don't keep up with all of that. I am part of the LGBT community, so I'm just going to say, but I don't care about labels that much. So, but I see people do posts like there was a big thing a couple years ago about everybody was like, oh, I have ADHD. And then, then it was like, oh no, I found out it's actually anxiety. And now it's, I'm neurospicy. I'm like, you're chasing labels, which is cool. That's fine if that's what you want to do. But underneath every single one of those things could potentially be religious trauma. And when I started doing tarot readings, and I made my first six figures just doing tarot readings. And then people wanted to know how I did it. So I became a business coach. I always call myself a reluctant business coach because I feel like, I need to teach people this But it's, I'm really most passionate about tarot and using it to change your life. Business can change your life, obviously, but if you get into a place in business where you can't make decisions, you're constantly bombarded by different things about shiny objects, right? Like, which one should I do? And you jump into every new platform and every new thing, and you never really get going, or you feel like you can't show up online, you can't show your face, you can't do certain things. All of that stuff can stem from religious trauma. And so that is why I stepped back and wrote my books on this. So, to get to your question, I'm like, what was your question? How to use this in therapy? I don't do predicting the future. I never really have. As a tarot reader, I've never thought that that was super useful. I will ask the cards, what is the most likely outcome given the energy, the choices I'm making, everything right now? And I will do this with my clients. What is the most likely outcome? I love that question, because you can look at that card and then you can make a decision. Is that the outcome I want? Or do I want something different? Okay, well, let's look at how to change that. How do you want to actually, make different choices and do different things in order to create the outcome that you want? And that really, to me, is the best way to use tarot, like you said, to dig into, basically some of those subconscious feelings and thoughts that are going on, that are driving you, that you may not recognize. And once you can kind of pull those things up and look at them, which some people call, shadow work and different things. But once you can pull that up and really look at it, then you can make conscious decisions based on knowing what your subconscious is doing. Now, I also, in tarot therapy, I like to use a plurality model, which is the plural mind. And so you've probably heard of some of the exercises where people will work with an inner child, or work with whatever part they work with. I actually look at, you have a lot of different parts of you. And so you have a lot of different inner children. You have a lot of different aspects, is what we call them in my work. Um, and connecting with those ones who have very strong opinions and who are, they're not trying to sabotage you, they're trying to protect you in the best way that they know how. And so you have to connect with them and figure out how you can work together in order for you to lead that whole inner community. And I use tarot cards to connect with those different parts, to find out what their needs are, what they're trying to do, and how to get them on board. And I will just interject here, I don't believe in an ego. I think the idea that if you have this bad ego is one of the most detrimental spiritual teachings that we have. I know it's really big in Buddhism and pretty much everywhere. But to me, that's no different than the fundamentalist Christians saying that it's the devil. I really think that people have taken this idea of ego and made it a negative thing. And I've even read in some Buddhist texts, because I love Thich Nhat Hanh. I have like 50 of his books, right? um and they talk about even killing the ego. Well, you can't do that. You can't kill a part of yourself. That's a horrible way to think. And so when I look at the different parts of yourself, these different aspects, what ends up happening is there's different parts of you that are doing things that, usually it's about 5 of them come together, and that kind of creates this ego type, what people think of as the ego. But if you talk to each one of them individually, all of that starts to dissipate and everyone starts to get on board, and your life is just so much better.
Yeah, you cannot live without ego. It's a part of us. It's what makes you get up in the morning and get in the shower and comb your hair, go to work and look good. And I mean, the trick is to not let it run your life, but to be an effective part of your life.
Mhm.
The tarot specifically talks about the strength card. Uh,
Yes.
I'm thinking of the strength card where you want to make friends with the ego. You want to make friends with that part of you, and use its strengths in order to propel you forward. Am I
Yeah.
interpreting that correctly?
Well, I don't believe in a one thing called an ego.
Hmm.
But we're talking about the same thing. To me, the ego is made of like different little parts of you, and you have to speak to each one of them individually. So same outcome, same kind of overall concept we're talking about, but the way I speak of it is just a slightly different.
When you talked earlier about how it affects the brain, that really caught my attention. I'm an ICU nurse in the real world. I'm still
Oh
work,
yeah.
I'm still working ICU. So when you're talking about how religious trauma affects our brains, we're talking about uh, actual brain function. How
Mhm.
from the left hemisphere to the right hemisphere. I deal with a lot of stroke patients. I mean, when you're
Yeah.
talking about that, I really caught my attention. Has there been an MRI confirmation of this type of thing?
There are a lot of studies, CAT scans and ECGs that I know of. I haven't seen any that are MRI specific. But if I dug into more recent research, I probably could find some of those, but definitely they have done brain scans. Yes.
It'll make an interesting study maybe to look forward in the future.
Yeah,
But probably resisted by every religious authority in the world.
definitely. Definitely. But there is the one group I really do like, even though I just don't at this point I just don't like organized religion. I've been into the deconstruction stuff for so long, and I just see there are some helpful parts, but there's just so much harm. But if you are looking for people who are proponents of staying in the religion and everything, new evangelicals is a great resource. um it's like the word new and then evangelical is in there, right? So new evangelicals. They're very smart and they're very up to date on making the change back from where things have gotten, and turning back the clock, or just, creating a new thing. But I have to also say, this whole rampant idea of fundamentalism and the Bible being like the inerrant, only true word of God, specifically speaking of the Bible, was actually started as a marketing campaign in the 1850s and gained speed in the 1880s. Before that, taking the idea of the Bible as anything or other than allegorical or just some good stories to kind of learn some life lessons from, there were a few people who pushed it, but they were mostly laughed at. That was not a thing. So in the 1850s, the printing press became a big thing. And you might know, or you might not, but most families had one Bible and it was passed down from generation to generation. And so a couple of guys got together and said, well, how could we make people buy more Bibles? And they basically said, let's say it's the truth. Let's say it is the true word of God. And if you want a relationship with Jesus and God, you have to own your own personal Bible. And since then, the Bible printing industry has become a 325 to $400 million a year industry in the United States alone. It is the most successful marketing campaign since, Diamonds Are Forever, which is also a bunch of crap. Like if you're buying someone a diamond engagement ring, I just think that's wow, look at the marketing go. It's just marketing. And the fact that we have built our entire country at this point. I live in the United States, but our entire country has been taken over by this marketing campaign. And our entire politics has been taken over by a marketing campaign that a few guys started to sell more Bibles. Makes me so angry. And like, I just want to go back in time and strangle them and say, don't do this. But that is where it came from. And that is really sad. And it's very sad that more people don't know that that is what happened.
I really don't buy the concept of this is the infallible word of God because it's a book written by men, maybe at the earliest part of the text, inspired by insight or a spiritual experience of some sort. As I look back into it, a lot of it comes from ancient mythology, all blended into a current mythology from Egypt, from ancient Greeks. So, anyway, I'm not going to get into that.
But it is, it's stories upon stories upon stories. And so to take any of those stories as truth in any religion is, or any belief system, like I'm a big fan sometimes of like, the Greek stories and Zeus and things like that. But I think I'm very much a Hindu at heart, because the Hindu belief is all faces of God are just a face of God. There's, one dynamic creative force out there. You can believe in more than one or whatever. It doesn't really matter. We're not going to know, until the aliens like walk up and tell us. They're just flying around right now. But the drone stuff, just like, oh my gosh, it's crazy. But we're not going to know, right? And so any face of God or any belief that you want to have, it's always made up. It's always man or woman made. And you can feel free to believe anything you want to believe, but don't push that belief on anybody else.
I also not tinker. I'm a student of the I Ching. I'm sure you've heard of the I Ching.
Yeah.
And the I Ching, many people say, Alan Watts would say the I Ching is like a 64-sided coin. You can ask it a question, and
Yeah.
and maybe the tarot, the way you're using it, is a 78-sided coin. Because I have a question about
Mhm.
some aspect of my life, and I throw a card, and it gives me a different perspective on that.
Yeah. It really does. And I think that a lot of that perspective is coming from yourself. So I have something I call the 5-minute tarot process, where I teach people how to read the card in a way that is making sure that it's getting to what is actually you're seeing, what's important to you in that moment, what is really going on in your subconscious. And sometimes it matches the meanings that of the card that are out there. Of course, like you said, we all look at the strength card and we get an idea of what that means. Jungian archetypes and all of those things, they're in the collective consciousness. But when you specifically go into a card the way that I teach it, a lot of times the meaning will either come up as something different, or you'll be going so much deeper into that it becomes a personalized meaning for you. And it really helps you get to the thing that is going to give you that different perspective. So over the years, a lot of my best tarot readings, I don't tell people what the cards are. I actually walk them through that process in the reading. So people will come to me and be like, do my tarot card, and I'll hold up a card and I'll be like, what do you see? And I'll walk them through it. They talk the entire time. It's all them, but I am there to actually guide them through it. And I felt bad about this for about a year or two at first, because I was like, this, I'm not doing anything. I'm just saying you do the work, right? But over the years, what I've come to understand online is that I have a very innate, intuitive way of asking the right questions to help people go deeper into that card. And when I teach people the process, but they don't sit down and do it with me, sometimes they have more problems. So I'm like, okay, cool. I'm valid. But you can do the process up to a point by yourself, pretty easily. It really does depend on how much you know thyself, right? I'm big into stoicism. And so it really does depend on that. It depends on how much you're willing to practice and how much you're willing to look at those things that you don't want to look at.
Mm. I just had a life activation, and I'm moving along that path. Um,
Mm,
it's interesting that it should come to me a little late in life for me. When just recently restarted doing this podcast, and one of the things I said was, I'm not going to do specific things on politics, but what I
mm,
am going to do is how to survive our incoming administration and the dramatic changes that are going to take place.
yeah.
You as a guest fit right into that definition.
Yeah.
Do you foresee a more need for services, especially with a trauma, as the new administration, which is highly structured on Christian nationalism? Do you
I
see?
was going to say hate. It's highly structured on hate. Yes,
uh,
Christian nationalism.
I'm going to be nicer,
Hate
but
and
yeah.
racism. It's sad. It's sad. And I don't know. My husband and I are gonna be fine. Um, and I blend in really well, right? I pass. I'm by. I'm a tarot reader. I'm ex-Christian. I'm kind of anti-organized religion to a degree. But if I go out in public, people think that I'm normal, right? I mean, people will even make racist comments around me, and when I push back, I will not let things like that pass. If you say something racist, anti-LGBT, make a trans joke or something in front of me, I no, them's fighting words. But people are very, very surprised about that. So I have that privilege of being able to walk around and not have people think anything about me. And so that is something my husband and I have been concerned with and talked about. Is he did take a new job, and I am supporting him in that. Right now I'm taking a little step back from my business in order to do that. But at the same time, how can I also show up for those people who are going to be attacked and are going to be at the most risk? That's always a concern for me. We're always like, well, we have this extra room in our house. We can always hide some people in the attic if it comes to that. I mean, we've literally thought about things like that.
You've thought it through much more than I've understood that it is my responsibility to help the more disadvantaged, and if in that type of situation, I need to step forward and help that one individual. I haven't thought that deeply about hiding somebody in my home. I hope it doesn't come to that. That's like
We
the
do
Anne,
too.
that's like Anne Frank, uh, uh, and I've been to the Anne Frank home, but yeah, I hope it doesn't get like that.
I hope it doesn't either. I think there's going to be a lot of I think a lot of people are going to die though from lack of health care, and they're talking about slashing services, slashing Medicaid, slashing veteran services, which my husband and I are both veterans as well.
Yeah,
Um
me too.
okay. So yeah, they're talking about taking all of that away, and for people to still support someone like that and not understand, but that is the actual definition of religious trauma, is that you hook into this guy that some people are calling the second coming of Christ, and there's actually someone wrote a song about it, right? And it blows my mind that you are told this thing and you believe it without question, because you're not allowed to educate yourself. You're
Mm.
only allowed to believe what that community believes. And unless someone can step in and stop that community from spouting these lies, it's hard to change it.
Yeah, and then like you talked about, if you're not moving more than 50 miles away from where you were born, you are locked into that community, and
Yeah,
that is a community think. That is how
it
we all
is.
think. That is your normal.
Yeah. You get into that, they call it an echo chamber,
Yeah.
you
So
know?
it's gonna be an interesting 4 years. Let's hang on for the ride. Amethyst, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I want to
Okay.
thank you so much. I really enjoyed our talk. You, whenever I do these interviews, I learn so much. I learned so much from you. I think if I had to buy one book from you, which one do you think I should buy?
Well, there's actually a mega bundle. The mega bundle is I sell these four together, and you can get the digital copies. It's the life map system, the light after darkness. This one's really good. 52 tarot spreads and case studies to overcome religious trauma. So you can actually read through it and then do the spreads on your own. It has the full color spreads in them and the examples of how the people used them and drew cards and read them. And then trauma informed meanings of the cards. This is all 78 cards, meanings, upright and reversed, only related to religious trauma. Not just like the normal definition, but specifically how it could show up in your life and things to consider if you're drawing cards around religious trauma. So those four come in a mega bundle. I think it's $25 for all four digital, but I run specials sometimes, so I'd have to look right now. My website is amethystmahoney.com. It's just my name.com. And then if you do have a business, of course, I have the business planner, which is amazing. This is my deck I created. This is my hermit card because it's a hermit year. I'm very proud of my deck. I'm very proud of all of my stuff. And my tarot symbols and meanings books, which is the normal definitions of the cards, but it also has the symbols, the colors, the numerology, the Kabbalah, and then upright and reverse meanings for if it's a general spread, if it's a career and business spread, or if it's a love and relationship spread for each card. So this is my go-to when I'm interpreting cards and I'm drawing cards, because sometimes it's hard to draw for yourself. So I like to look that up and see, am I missing something in this particular spread? And I'm always surprised. There's always something cool in there for me. And I've been reading since I was 12. So
It came
40,
good for you.
38 years.
Wow. Well, it came on me a little late in life, but it's been dramatic. Some of
Yeah.
it's been dramatic, and I want to thank you, Amethyst. I hope we can talk again. And
Yeah, that'd be great.
I think I'm going to pick up a book or two. Okay, you have. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
And that was my interview with Amethyst Mahoney. She was very nice. I very much enjoyed our conversation. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. She could be a little controversial. I, hey, this is going to be a controversial world we're living in for the next 4 years. Speaking of the next 4 years, I usually do a live reading. I'll draw cards and I'll throw some runes and then I'll do an interpretation. But I did and I'm offering free readings at this time. I do free readings on Twitch. If you are out there and you need a reading, I'll contact me at johnstarot.net, John at johnstarot.net. I'll throw a few cards for you. If you need to have an appointment, do some live time, we can arrange for that. But I was throwing some cards for myself this week. I was worried about the incoming administration and what's going to happen and how am I going to deal with this. And this was a reading that came up for me personally. This is my personal reading. I'm going to share it with you because I felt that it was worth taking a look at. It's worth sharing. So the first card on this reading was the Nine of Swords. Well, I usually throw this out there. My ability to read tarot is a gift and expression of divine love, and I'm here to share it with you in that same spirit. So my first card was the Nine of Swords, and it shows a woman. I think it's a woman, and she's got the Nine of Swords above her, and she's crying, and she's very stressed out. She's got a lot of anxiety, and I guess that was me as I was looking at the question. And what's going to happen with this oncoming administration? And that, and most of that has to do with the anxiety that people experience and that I may be experiencing in regards to it's mostly mental. It's mostly in my mind. Look, we've survived for 200 years. I imagine we'll survive for another 200 years. That, my anxiety about that is mostly self-created. And so I need to not have so much anxiety, but I am having some. Obviously, on that day, I was having some, which just really surprised me. When I do tarot cards, and it comes up exactly talking about what I'm going through. And then the rune that is right below it is called Iwas. Iwas has to do with spiritual advancement. Um, that you're moving, and that's the sign of the horse. This M is supposed to be a horse, so you're supposed to be moving through this situation with dignity, and and just kind of ride the wave, ride it like it's a noble horse, and do it with dignity and controlled. It has to do with controlled change, and that's what's coming. There's gonna be some controlled change, and that I need to progress, and there's movement coming our way, and I just need to hang in there and do this with dignity, move forward with this with dignity. And then the Five of Swords, man, I was just amazed the way this came out. So the Five of Swords is a guy, you'll see him, he's got a green tunic on. I'm using the Rider-Waite deck for those who are just listening, and he's got some swords on his shoulder, on his left shoulder, So I'm not happy with. This explains the circumstance, what's going on in the general circumstance. I'm not happy with the way some of my fellow human beings are moving forward, but my fellow countrymen are completely controlled by selfish interests, and that's why I'm not happy about it. That's why our current administration has is coming into office. They voted on their selfish self interests, and though I'm not happy about it, I need to keep my sword of truth close. Right? He has the swords on his shoulder. I need to keep that and have a thick skin, the green tunic. So I know what the truth is. I That's the problem with being a little bit psychic and having uh, runes and having tarot is you get a peek on the inside. I need to have a thick skin, not get too engaged with all this stuff. I know what the truth is, and just kind of sidestep some of these guys. I had a woman come at me this week, a Trumper, and just go off on me about why this is so wonderful, why, and I'm just like, you know what, he's elected, and I just wanted to sidestep it. Any of our current problems we're having are not created by this individual, not created by his administration. Let's give him a year. Let's see what happens. I did a reading just in the past, and that's what it told me. Let's give it a year. Let's see what happens. The rune underneath it is Tiwaz. That is the rune of the warrior, and I need to be like a warrior, right? I need to just be steadfast, uh, wait on the will of heaven, and we're going to see whatever comes my way. I'm going to be able to deal with it. And then the final card is Judgment, and which was kind of interesting too, because I just went through something this week called it was last Saturday. It's called I forget what it was called now, a life awakening. It'll come to me, and and it kind of opened me up a little bit. It was a thing I arranged to do that opened me up a little bit, and I've had some epiphanies this week, some things that have broadened my perspective, and that is the Judgment card. You'll see Saint Michael above. That's the higher self is awakening some dormant aspects of my consciousness, which have been inside the tombs, and so I forget what they call it. I will put it up on my webpage. Uh, you'll have to search for it though. It'll be a hidden Easter egg, and I'll talk about it on my webpage. And I have some areas. I have an area there where I'm posting some private stuff that I'm not posting on YouTube. So I did have a bit of an awakening, an epiphany, and it's an ongoing process for me. And then the rune is called Pertho, and Pertho is a looks like a cup. It could mean several things. One thing it means is oh, life is a game. You're taking a chance. You're throwing the dice. We'll see what happens. But also it means it also has to do with uh, having a new perspective, like a phoenix that has died, and then the rebirth of the phoenix, which I thought was kind of interesting, given how it came up right underneath the Judgment card. So I've had a bit of an awakening, a rebirth, a change in perspective, and I'm kind of soaring above my old viewpoints into a new perspective as I go forward. And I talked about this was my experience as a reading gun for me. I think that for anybody watching this podcast or listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube, this would be solid advice for any of you who are experiencing that same type of anxiety. And you know the truth. We're not happy about our fellow human beings, but we need to get through this. You need to have the patience of the warrior, and that and wait, and we will be okay. And that oncoming will be a new awakening, a new understanding that you didn't have before. And though and though this it will be a rebirth, like a rebirth of the phoenix, and we're going to be okay. So, if nobody wants a free reading on Twitch, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up for this week.
Goodbye, Professor Marvel, and thanks a lot.
It was my pleasure. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you, like I said, if you would like to be interviewed for John's Tarot, get a hold of me at john@johnstarot.net. If you need a free reading, you're having some problems. If you need an extended, if you need some extended time with me, we'll work something else out. I am still a working nurse, but I can throw some cards for you. I have this thing called, I think it's called Streamlabs. And we could do a live internet discussion, throw cards for you. I could do a live reading for you. But for something like that, if I'm going to spend some time, there's going to have to be some level of compensation. A couple of free cards is no big deal. But if you need more time than that, we're going to have to work something out. So until next week, be careful, be cool, be kind, and remember, have courage, find faith, and I'll see you all again next week. Okay, bye-bye.